Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Just a little bit taller than Darlene, not a whole lot, but a little bit. So, this Saturday, I was supposed to be in Calgary. When COVID hit 2.5 years ago, of course, like all of us, we couldn't get on a plane, train, boat, couldn't leave your house. So finally, the vax mandates had been lifted, so lo and behold, I could get on a plane. So I hadn't seen my grandchildren in 2.5 years. They went from 4 and 2 to 6 and 4 years old. It's a good thing for FaceTime. But anyway, so I had planned a trip to go and see them, and I thought, well, I'll just fly out of Halifax so I can get a direct flight. I don't have to stop in Toronto because, you know, we all know there's lots of trouble going on there. So anyway, I got to the airport and I decided that I was going to stand on my God-given constitutional human rights.
Yeah.
And I started to go through security, and they explained that I was required to wear a mask. And I said, no, indeed, I'm not. My human rights and my constitutional rights says I do not have to wear a mask.
That's right.
It is a choice. And after they got the fourth supervisor to come over and talk to me, what he said was, everybody else is wearing one. And I said, well, that's great. They have a choice. And I have a choice not to wear one. And he said, well, they will not let you on the plane. I said, well, we'll see about that. So he continued to tell me that I was going no further than where I was standing. So I had a notice of liability from Action for Canada, and I asked his name, and he gave me his name. When I asked to spell it, and he saw that I was writing something down, he said, what are you doing? I said, I'm handing you a notice of liability. I said, this is to state that if anything happens to me because of you forcing me to wear this mask over and above my constitutional rights, then you will be held liable. Well, he said, whoop, you're not getting my name. I said, indeed I am. And I wrote it down and I gave him the notice of liability. And at that point I said, give me the mask and I will go through security. So I took the mask and I was waiting in line. And when the time came to enter into the secure area, I did don the mask. I felt like I had caved, but I wanted to go see my grandchildren. And so as I went through and scanned my boarding pass, I did happen to look and it said, have a good trip, it's approved. So as I walked through, the young man that I gave the notice of liability to was standing there, and he was not pleased with me. So he came and said, excuse me, ma'am, can you rescan your boarding pass? And I said, why? And he said, well, because it didn't go through. I said, that's not true. I saw it. It was approved, and now you've lied to me. I said, you know, what's the problem? And he said, well, I just need your name and your boarding pass number so I can let WestJet know that indeed you have complied, because you did want to speak to them. And I said, well, that's all fair and good, but I'll tell them myself when I get to the gate. Okay, so they let me go through. I went through security. They rooted through my purse. They checked my purse. It was all fine. I went up to the departure gate and I sat there for an hour because I was early. And then they called for boarding, and everybody lined up like perfect good sheep, all with their mask on. And I just thought, well, they'll call by row or whatever it is, so I don't have to wait in line. And then I heard, would Melanie McDonald please come to the counter?
Oh.
So I went up, and there was a woman standing there in a security vest. And she pulled me aside and she said, you've been denied access to the plane. I said, excuse me? She said, Well, security sent a letter and said that you were causing trouble and you have been denied access to the plane. I said, no, that's not right. I said, I have a ticket, I purchased a ticket, and I have complied. And at that time, I had my mask on. And she said, well, I even spoke to the crew, and they told me that they didn't want to deal with you.
Oh, wow.
I said, really? I said, so they're assuming that I'm going to cause trouble on the plane. That sounds to me like discrimination. And at that point, I took my mask off.
Good.
And I said, I would like to speak to the crew. And she said, absolutely not. I said, all right then, get my bag. And she said, you can get your bag down at the counter. So I went down to the counter and I met with another manager. You know, everybody passed the buck. Every single person passed the buck. In security, they told me it was a supervisor, and the supervisor told me it was another supervisor, and that supervisor told me it was the federal government, and so on and so on and so on. And then this supervisor told me it was the crew, but they wouldn't let me speak to the crew. And so I went down and I spoke to yet another manager, and she told me that was as high as I was getting that day. And she told me by no means could they take my bag off the plane. It was going to go to Calgary and then come back and I could pick it up later that day. I said, well, I don't live here, for one thing. I said, and that is my private property, and you indeed are going to take my bag off that plane. Nope, can't be done. She said, we're not going to hold the plane and people have to make their connections. I said, that's not my problem. If you'd let me on the plane, we could have been gone by now. However, you did not let me on the plane. I want my bag. And she said, that is not happening. We cannot do that. And so at that point, I said to her, I said, okay, now you're going to have to deal with a lawsuit. And then she went, oh, heard the word lawsuit. This conversation is over. I said, fair enough. You will hear from me. So I went outside and my husband went right back in. And he said, listen, he said, my wife has been waiting 2.5 years to see her grandchildren, and this was it. And you have denied her. So don't tell me that you understand, and don't tell me that you're sorry that you can't do something, because you indeed are going to do something. And you're going to take her bag and get it off that plane. So we waited for about another half an hour, and yes, indeed, I did get my bag. Thank you, honey. So here I am. I'm not out west. They did not let me fly. I did get an email from them the other day stating that if I was going to wear my mask, that I could fly, and they have given me a voucher for my ticket, which I don't know about you, but I will never ever support WestJet ever again. So hopefully I can get my money back and they can do whatever they want with their voucher.
Yeah.
So mandates are not done, and the tyrannical governance that we have is still in full force out there, people. So, you know, you either stand your ground and sacrifice and pay the consequences, or you bow down and continue to take it. It's up to you, but because of all the compliance, this is why we're in the state that we're in.
That's right.
We are no longer a free state. Your constitutional rights mean nothing, and we are no longer allowed to travel freely in our own country. And it's a sad, sad day.
It is.
So anyway, we just got to keep praying, and you know, God knows what's going on, and there will be justification someday.
Someday.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Mel.
Great story. I have a question. Don't they have a policy if you're back?